Hey guys, Muncheez here, and today we're going to talk about problems. All right, problems. If for some of you guys who know me, I've been playing this game since launch, and I usually don't put out videos like this. I hate being doomer and whatever, but these are some things that I've had feelings about and things that I've had dealt with personally while playing this game for the past couple of months, and I figured I would go over them and kind of share them with you guys. And hopefully this video makes it to somebody to bring kind of awareness to some of the stuff that's happening. I'm sure there's probably someone else out there that feels this way. If not, and it's just me, it's perfectly okay. So we can get started here. I'm going to have a whole bunch of words and a whole bunch of lists on the video and the wall. So we're going to go through this. So if you are a player who just has a main character already, you've already decided on your main, like myself, there's these problems that generally come out with new content. So at the time that I'm making this video, the Ivory Tower is being released this week, which on hard is on 1620, which wasn't an unrealistic goal to hit, but it was very possible, and there was actually a lot of people at 1620. So the problems here that I dealt with when I was playing this on the first week, so groups are generally statics, which means there's no room for you. There's these weird groups listed on there that they just stay listed for hours. It took me probably 5 to 6 hours to find folks to play with. I actually had to wait for one of my friends to get online, and I was actually able to do the dungeon with a friend of mine who helped make a group. And there's a lack of supports here, which was one of the main reasons. So there were, at a point, there was like 4 or 5 groups that were just only looking for support. And so the lack of supports is usually a rarity to find a support main, and usually if they are a support main, they're usually in a static already. So most people who play this game, including myself, they have a support as an alt, and it is a high cost to get from 1600 to 1620. It's not cheap. Even if you're like doing buses and whatever you're doing to supplement your gold income, it's very expensive to get here. So with those resources that you're getting, you're probably going to dump them into your main, because the things that cost gold, usually like the high cost things, are going to be on the main character. It's either that or you're going to make an alt. So yeah, so maybe the only thing that came to mind, I was like, oh yeah, maybe like, like how Maple Story has, like bonus events for vertical progression and whatnot. Maybe you can have a bonus event for supports. I don't know. I'm horrible with these solutions, but I do know it is a problem. It costs way too much to get to 1620. Therefore, it is a support shortage for a while, right? So the same thing happened to Akan, but 1600 wasn't too much of a reach because you were able to get to 1600 by getting the gear, and it made it a lot easier to reach 1600 after you got the gear. But there is none of that from 1600 to 1620. The cost is the cost, and it is very high. The other problem that I have with having a 1620 character is, so when you come in the game and you do your daily logins, right? You do your daily logins, they're horrible. They are terrible. They don't have much use for your character. Even if you save for like 2 or 3 months, like everything in there, and you gave it all to your main character, those materials are best used for like alts. Like there's, I looked at the login rewards for this month, and within the whole month, like say you wanted to hone like your weapon or your armor or whatever, for the whole month, on top of playing the game, right, you only get like 600 red crystals for your weapon, right? So a lot of people like to hone their weapon and push the weapon, but you get 600 from 20 to 21, or even from 19 to 20. It costs over 1,000 of those red crystals, those obliteration crystals, to tap once. So for a whole month of playing, you're telling me that the game is giving you, half of a tap? That's crazy, right? And then they throw things in there on the first day like phoenix plumes to be like completely troll, or I don't even know what it is. I don't know if it's like a tradition or whatever. It's fine, but it's just silly, right? And then there's other things in there like tripods and things like that, which are great. All these rewards are great for alts, but what they're not great for is your main. So you're pretty much getting rewards for alts. The rewards that come in this game do not come for your main. Now, this next list, these are just general problems that come with new content, and these are general problems in general, like just kind of combined. But anyway, so when new content comes, so we got Voldus this week, Hardly anyone does any of the other content, even though you want to complete them for the week. So the problem is there are hardly any groups, so it's kind of like a compound issue. There are people that gatekeep, so they want like really high item level, and even if like you're already finished like with your level 3 set, like my character is, and you want to just do the raid and get it out of the way, there's like hardly any groups, and there's, as you can see, there's 3 hard mode lobbies up. That's if all of them were full, that's 12. That's 12 players. If they were all full, there's 12 players on the West Coast making lobbies for a hard mode Kaingo. It's insane to me. All right. So most of the time, this is just random footage, by the way. And as I was going through this, I was like, oh, this kind of lines up perfectly, so I can kind of show, right? And I've spoke to people on East Coast too. They said they have the exact same problem. It's not as severe, but there's not as many groups still, right? And I was thinking about this and I was like, man, the solution for this, because I kind of like, I like to solve these problems myself. So the solution that I kind of came up with when I was thinking about this was, maybe I have to find like a group to play with finally, because like the community is getting so small. But it's weird because it's kind of awkward to kind of like put yourself into a group. And then like if you want to leave because like it's not your thing, like what if I don't enjoy it, right? Like I kind of have that in my back of my mind, which is partially my own anxiety, right? But still, if you join and then you want to leave, it's kind of more like awkward. It's like, man, they might not want to play with me anymore. There's not that many people to begin with. You know what I mean? So that's just like my own insecurities kind of, but it's still, I feel like people think this way where like the community's small and it's kind of awkward to find your way into a group that's already existing. And this is all in efforts just to finish the new content, by the way. So like maybe they want to run other stuff, but like my goal is to just do the new content that comes out and have a good time. You know what I mean? And another thing is, this is just like a quality of life thing, and I kind of want to push this, but the only thing that kind of bothers me is like when you're queuing for groups and there are multiple lobbies up, you're only able to queue for one lobby. I'm not like a web developer or like a game developer or any kind of like developer, right? Like this isn't my specialty, but I know there are games that allow you to queue for more than one lobby when there are multiple lobbies up. And this kind of helps a lot because you can apply to multiple groups, and it's not like you're going to flood all the group queues because there's not that many people, right? As I can like show and I've proven earlier, there's only 3 groups for hard, right? So if I was able to queue for all 3 groups at the same time, I would have like a 1 in 3 chance of getting in, as opposed to queuing for one. And then if one of the other groups that would have taken me, like they pick someone else instead of me and then they left already, I no longer have that chance to get into that group. So I don't know. I feel like this would be a nice quality of life to be able to queue for more than one lobby. And jails are still a thing. This is the general issue. So jails are still a thing. And if Smilegate isn't against busing, just allow people to run the gates they've already cleared. So what this would do for people who are actually playing the game and like doing the game normally with regular groups, it would allow them a means to find another group after like failure. Because if you get jailed somewhere where nobody ever gets jailed at, then you can still find a group to finish the dungeon. So you can at least get your last bit of rewards, right? And the only argument to not do this is so people can't infinitely bust. But honestly, at this point, like for me personally, if someone wants to infinitely bust all day, so be it. I don't care. The gold is out of control anyway. The inflation is crazy, and there is nothing in the future that I'm seeing that's going to help with it. So there's another issue where the game is also highly inaccessible unless you're taken care of like by friends who can help. So even then, when your friends help you, your progression on that character is still kind of dependent upon yourself. And with the winter law on, they announced certain things where they're going to give like the horizontal boost. So like they front load all the skill point potions and the runes and everything. So you can do missions or whatever, and then they'll give you those rewards. And I feel like that was something that they learned from us doing the Jumpstart servers. And it was like the main complaint that like everybody had. So I think they took that feedback, if they got it, and they implemented that into some of the changes that are coming. But things like gems and cards and roster level and like things of that nature are, even if you have help from your friends, unless they're feeding you all this stuff, like gems, I don't know of anyone who's like, yeah, sure, you can just use all my level 10 gems. Or the best case scenario I can think of is, oh, you made the same class as me. I'm gonna take a break for a while. Here, use these gems in place while I'm gone, and then you can kind of work on your own. Like that's the best case scenario I can think of for a friend helping someone with like something like gems, right? But other than that, highly inaccessible unless you're taking care of friends, and even then, still rough, right? And this next list, these are compound problems. So there's these things that the game does, and it's weird because it kind of mixes like the whole KR MMO thing with like the Western culture, and it's weird because there's this whole like don't do this, don't do that thing. And the best example I could think of is cards. And it doesn't matter because you get shafted regardless. Like it doesn't matter. Like all these things that people are like really uptight about. My example is cards. There's other things in the game too that follow this example, but they're like, hey, don't do this. Like don't open, these selector card packs in the beginning, blah, 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 blah. So what ends up happening is you don't do it and you're like, oh, that advice was great, right? So the advice is good, right? It's not that it's bad advice to say don't do this, don't do that. So you finish your card set, right? But what ends up happening is, so now there's things like dark card sets and, bonus beast damage, bonus like plant damage. There's like all these bonus damage things. So what ends up happening is you're on a shortage of card XP and things like this. So you end up farming and doing all this stuff anyway. So you're not saving any time or doing anything. So there's like this, don't do this, don't do that. And the whole thing that a lot of the players tried to push, like the veteran players, but like before we got our version, was like, just play what's like fun for you, right? And that's kind of like off balance because people tend to not do that. People are always like, oh, what's the new class? Or like, I'm just going to play the new class because the new class is the strongest and do all this, do all that. And there's like this endless cycle, right? But it's just kind of crazy that this is still a thing, and then like people make these tier lists which are completely absurd and bogus, and you can do anything in the game at the end content with whatever build spec, whatever, and people are still gatekeeping based on classes and things like that. It's absolutely crazy to me. Now, the other thing is the vertical progression. It's too RNG for the gold sync systems that they have, especially if it's a gold sync after a gold sync after a gold sync. And all it is RNG. So elixirs are the ones that we just got. So elixirs are the most you can get from what I've read and learned about it. Elixirs are the most you can get per gold spent for like a damage increase on your character for vertical progression to make your character stronger, right? So the vertical progression in this game, it's like paying interest on your characters. So on your main character, when you reach a new milestone, right? So say you reach 1610 or 1620, right? So you already spent, right? So say you took your credit card, right? Or your debit card, right? Or you, whatever. Say you volunteered, got a reward, your character is at 1610 or 1620. Once you get there, you start paying interest, right? It's essentially paying interest on your character once you reach that milestone, right? So you're just in this constant loop of farming where you're not actually getting to use your rewards for something other than alts. And there's this whole like, don't hone your alts past, this level, don't hone these alts, don't make these alts, don't do this, don't do that, right? But all these rewards that you get are useless for your main. They're used for your alts. All your event shop stuff, your Arc Pass stuff, all this stuff, you can, like, if you use it for your main, you hardly get much out of it. Like, if you go and do the math for it, unless you get stupid lucky and you one-tap everything, which is highly, highly unlikely. I'm not saying it's not possible, but that is generally not the case, right? So anyone who's played this game knows that is generally not the case, right? It always comes back around. So you get all these rewards from all these other places, but those rewards, even if you stockpile them and give them to your main, they're best used for the alts. They're made for the alts. They want you to make alts, right? So this whole don't hone your alts, don't do this, don't do that, you're still going to make alts. And that just goes back to, the rewards you get playing the game on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever you're doing. These rewards are generally best used on alts for replay value and for fun's sake and everything like that. So these don't give your main like anything. And the Korean and Western version, there's still gaps, right? It's still a large gap. And as far as I remember, it's at least like 2 to 3 content patches behind. Right now, after this Loa on, we're still a huge content patch behind. And if we get Thaymine before they get their new raid, it's kind of crazy because it's going to be so accelerated that when we have this accelerated version, like they're trying to close the gap. But the problem with closing that gap is a lot of the systems in this game are time gated. So even though they give us like a little bit of extra rewards here and there, Korea gets the same stuff, but they have much longer periods of downtime to farm. So they get more things like honor shards, honing materials, and things like that in between their content patches. And even when they've had it rushed, we've had it rushed for us too. It's not like they had it any worse or better than we did, other than the fact that they've had more time, right? So I'm not saying one had it worse than the other. I'm just saying that there are problems with having an accelerated version that the Korean version did not have. And the last couple of things on the list, one of them is the mechanics, where people still mess up one mechanic and the whole party wipes. People don't like this. People hate this. It creates both reasonable and unreasonable gatekeep. It is horrible and terrible, and they said they were going to get rid of it, but they're not getting rid of it. As soon as you step into like the Ivory Tower, Gate 2, the very first mechanic, if one person messes it up, it's a wipe. So it's a recurring theme. It's got to stop. Make more group things like soaks. I don't know if Smilegate knows what a soak is, but a soak is where it's a AoE that goes onto one person and have people stand into it as like a team effort kind of thing. And even if one person messes up, like what ends up happening is like people will take like more damage or whatever. Like things like that. Like more team-based mechanics, less solo, if one person messes up, you wipe the whole raid. Have it so like maybe like 1 or 2 people, have to mess something up to wipe the whole raid, not just one person. It's silly. And I actually forgot to mention this. So this is like a recurring theme ever since we had our first Loa on after we got our game. So the decisions that the Korean, like the devs make and like what they announce on their thing, it's as if like they don't really care about what happens in our version. And the only example I can think of right now off the top of my head, because it was the most recent, was they announced the Echidna or Ladon, whatever you want to call her upgrade system after clearing it. So this is going to affect our market, specifically our market directly, and it's actually already affecting the KR market. So when Thaymine came out, a lot of the materials and all that stuff dropped in prices because no one was honing or doing anything because no one knows what was coming next, right? So that crash that happened in KR, and our market is actually smaller, at least the West is. It's smaller than what KR's is, right? So it's going to have a bigger impact on us to where the price crash for things like leap stones and like honing material of that nature, they're not going to drop as drastically as Korea's did because we now know that we're going to use the same honing materials, right? If that makes sense. So before, no one was honing because you didn't have to do it anymore. And then now you're still going to need those materials because you're going to have to use those same materials to get higher than what Korea is at now, even though Korea hasn't gotten that patch yet. So the whole strategy of, sell now and then buy later in terms of honing materials and things of that nature, that process is now going to be drawn out longer and wider, if that makes sense. That's the best way I can think of an analogy for that. Another thing is just kind of a small thing, but it kind of like crossed my mind, so I figured I'd throw it out in there. There's no system outside of a times 10 title to show how well someone can do a raid, right? So there's no like rating or logs or anything like that in this game. I don't know how they would do it, but that's just something that would probably help with the gatekeeping in this game if there was some way to show how well someone can do a raid. Not a card set, not a title, not your gems, right? Just something that could like communicate or signal to a party that you're applying to. And it's just kind of awkward, right? So it feels like there's not really much to show for after you've done a raid probably like 1,000 freaking times, right? So now, I hate being a doomer, so I'm going to end on a positive note. So the pros are the combat is still fun, the skins and the characters still look great. They're wonderful. It's one of the best looking games I've played in my life playing MMOs, in my opinion. It's not a fact or anything like that. So quality of life changes usually always go in the right direction. They're really great when they come out with them, and there's lots of content and stuff to look forward to. Things like the solo content and the accelerated horizontal stuff where they're front loading all the potions. There's a huge list of good things that are coming. So these are all things that I'm looking forward to personally. But as you can see, the number of problems that I can think of in my mind while I was making this video to the amount of pros, I feel like there's no compromise in between these values that I hold in this game, right? So hopefully I'm a unique case and it's just me, but I hope that this makes it to the right ears and someone hears this or shares this with someone. So I'm actually urging, if you watch this video, please share, like, whatever you need to do to help me out or help anyone out that feels the same way, to, you know, bring these problems to light. And I'm pretty sure there's more things to have in between, like more things to discuss. But that's all for this video. It's been a long video and a huge freaking rant. If you made it this far, thank you guys for watching. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, as always, feel free to leave it in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.